Life is a book that contains many chapters, and at the end of each chapter, we realize we have learned a new and valuable lesson. Some lessons are harder to see than others, and one day, we will understand why some of these things happen to us. My name is Melinda Copeland, and this documentary tells the story of a very significant chapter closing in my life. Approximately 150 students and faculty members from all over Georgia, including myself, studied abroad in London, England during the summer of 2005 and were involved in the terrorist attacks on the tube and a double-decker bus. A fellow classmate of mine, Heather Harris, joined me on this trip to make a video for the study program. When the terrorist attacks occurred on July 7, 2005, our advisor asked us to switch gears and get first-hand testimonials and footage of what happened. That day for me was a blur of panic and confusion. Heather and I were with a group in Canterbury, and once we found out about the bombings in central London, we became fearful that other students in our program were involved. We had to face our fears and get on several different buses and walk miles in the pouring rain to get safely back to campus. We were angry, confused, and most of all, emotional about the situation. While those in my group felt our day was stressful, each classmate has a different story. Some were one stop away from King's Cross, others didn't have a class until later and stayed on campus. Nonetheless, every story is worth hearing and deserves to be told by the wonderfully brave people that experienced that tragic day.
A lot of people were scared.
Just worried about what was going to happen next for us.
If it's going to happen to you, there's nothing you can do about it.
If you're going to die, you're going to die. I mean, there's no point in worrying about it.
Sometimes I really just don't understand people, and I don't understand their logic, and I don't understand why they do certain things.
I've never been that close to anything quite like this.
That it was 9/11 all over again. I was on the tube. Our class had met at 8:45 to leave to head to King's Cross Station.
We were, I was with my Brit Lit class 1. We were in Canterbury, and we left earlier than usual. We normally take our class field trips at 9 a.m., but this particular morning we had to leave out at 8:30.
I had woken up and was planning my day because it was a field trip day, but I don't have that class, so it was a free day for me. And I'd gotten up and I was planning on where I was going, and then I had my window open and I heard somebody shouting to somebody else to wake them up, telling them what happened. And then when I heard that there were bombs, it was kind of like, you know, a trigger in my head, and it kind of, you know, so I immediately went up and started looking on, you know, online and that sort of thing.
Well, we were about to get onto the tube, and they told us that they just had some minor little explosions, you know, that weren't bombs, that were just something wrong with the tubes. And so when I come back and heard it on the news, that was just really shocking.
I was asleep in my bed, and I didn't wake up actually till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I found out. So I was kind of being lazy that day, but I guess being lazy was a blessing. I wasn't on the trains.
The first bomb, I was actually in my room. Someone woke me up because I didn't have a field trip till later. It was quite intense because I just remember thinking, this is the only day that I haven't had an early field trip, and I've been to all those places, and I was going to real close to there that same day.
I was still in my bedroom in the dorms, and usually my field trip for that day usually leaves at 8:30, but for this particular day we didn't need to leave until 11. And so I had woken up and was getting ready, had no idea that anything was going on. I didn't have a TV or radio or anything. And our phone rang and I answered it, and it was one of the professors trying to find a girl that was in my dorm. And she told me what happened, and I was just in a state of shock, and she was just like, you just need to go call your family.
I was on a train on the way to the King's Cross station where the bomb on the tram happened. We were on our way to a trip to Cambridge for my history class. We stopped there, got off the train, and got on a bus to come back.
Actually, that day I slept in late, so my class waited for me at the tube station, and when I got there, we couldn't get on the train because the intercom came over and said there had been a bombing.
My wife came in on Thursday, and so I went out to the airport to get her. And she landed about, I think, 7:30. And so we got on the Gatwick Express and came into Victoria Station. And we got in to Victoria, I think, right about the time that the bombs were exploding.
Well, when the first bombs hit, I was getting ready to go on my field trip, and I walked outside and I heard someone say that a bomb, or not a bomb actually, that a train had exploded, or there was a train explosion, and they thought it was a power surge. And then just seriously, minutes after that, I heard that more and more bombings had happened, and when we met for our field trip, we were pretty sure that we weren't going to go on it. And seriously, within the hour, because we were going to meet again, we all knew that it was a terrorist attack.
Well, my professor, Dr. Monica Youngzuk, told us, she was like, you guys, if we can keep going with the tour, let's do that, because we're in Canterbury, and the bombings actually happened around central London, and all of the tube stations were saying, and the train stations were saying, you may not be able to get back in London. So they were saying that there's a possibility that we may actually have to, catch a hotel that night. Well, the people in my group, and myself included, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure everybody was fine. So we did try for like 5 minutes to try and continue going on with the tour, but after hysteria kicked in, we all left, went to an internet cafe and found payphones to call our parents to make sure they knew that we were fine, and to make sure everybody else here in the program as well as could be.
Well, we came back here and we started watching they had the TV on, and the teachers, as soon as they found out, they told us to get in touch with our parents as soon as we could and to let them know that we were okay. Well, we were told to meet as a group about our field trip because we were supposed to go on it, but our teacher was actually going to get his wife from the airport, and it took him actually 8 hours to get back. So, we never even saw him till afterwards, but they pretty much told us to just stay together and stay on campus and try not to go anywhere.
First thing was some guy came on the train, just a civilian, no person that worked for the underground, anything like that. It said there was a bombing, but we figured it could be rumors, stuff like that. I really didn't find out until I got back to campus everything that had happened, but word of mouth told me that, we needed to get back home.
I heard a lot of rumors between the local people, and they were all talking about bombs, but I found out concrete when I went in my room and checked the internet when I finally got back.
Well, they didn't really give any details when it first happened, so we just were making jokes that it was probably like a Parisian that was mad because Paris didn't get picked for the Olympics. Like, we had no idea. Like, we just thought it was just one. We didn't think it was like multiple ones or anything like that.
What happened was I was on my way to Dover, and the trains just closed down. The station we were at, I can't remember which one it was, it just totally shut down. So we ended up taking a bus to Dover, and then we were gone the whole day. And I had heard some people having phone conversations talking about things, but I wasn't sure what happened. And I didn't find out until that night coming home from Dover.
We evacuated out of Baker Street and came up onto the top of Baker Street at Marylebone Road, and then a discussion ensued whether we should jump on the nearest bus. We subsequently found that one of the buses that went to Tavistock Square passed right by us. I'm glad that I said that we should just get on, or just walk into town and not get on any bus.
The lady came on the overhead and said that there were some problems and that there was going to be some delays, that everyone had to evacuate immediately. We didn't know why, she didn't say why, we just all got off, and it immediately turned into chaos because there were people everywhere trying to get out of the station as fast as possible. We got outside and we decided that we were going to try to take a bus, because we didn't realize that there were bombings, and so we just figured that we would take a bus to King's Cross. Somehow we lost our professor in the crowd, but there were 12 of us that were able to stay together, and we went to the bus stop and we couldn't figure out which bus to take, and it was really cold and we were frustrated, and so we decided to go in a coffee shop. We were trying to figure out what to do because we were lost and we were without our professor. This lady was sitting near us and she was talking on her cell phone, and she said that the person she was talking to said that there had been bombs on the tube. At first, I didn't really believe her. I didn't really think that it was true, but it did kind of scare us. And so we decided that we just were going to try to come back to the dorms and not go to Cambridge. We started to try to find a bus that was going to bring us back here, and we kept hearing more things about bombs. We heard that there was one on a bus. That made me really scared to get on a bus to come back here, but we didn't really have a choice because we were just kind of stranded. So we found a bus that was coming back here. Every time the bus stopped, the bus driver would get out and go look through the whole bus. He even would go upstairs and look for any bags or packages that had been left behind, because a bus had just previously exploded. And so it was very real, and it was really scary to know that we were in the middle of it.
While we were on the tube, they asked us if we could just change trains at the next station. When we got to the next station, they actually said, well, no trains are working, so you're going to have to continue your journey by bus. And at that point, we had no idea that it was bombs or anything. They didn't say anything like that. So we got on the bus, and on the first bus, you know, whispers and stuff were going about bombs. You know, people were on their cell phones. And so we're just kind of like, okay, you know, is this a rumor? So our teacher was like, okay, well, let's change here. We're going to keep going, you know. So we changed buses and got on the next one. Well, that one, people were really talking about it. And there was this one specific guy that was in the background that was just on his cell phone, you know, talking about these bombs that are going off. There's 4, 5, 6, I don't know, you know, there's been going off on buses. And so at that point, you know, we were a little shaken, but our teacher wanted us to keep going. And then he got a phone call from his friend that actually lives in London and was just asking him if he's somewhere safe because something terrible was happening, there's bombs. So at that point, I think that scared our teacher just a little bit. So we did get off, and then we went to the nearest coffee shop and actually saw it on the news and what everything was going on. We got on another bus, and then we were at another bus stop, and we see this bag that's just left there. It was an unattended bag, so I think that freaked our teacher out. Of course, you know, we were nervous about that. We didn't know where they would be, so we walked the last 3 miles.
We got in to Victoria, I think, right about the time that the bombs were exploding. because we got off that train and into the underground station. Actually, I still have the underground ticket. They sold us at 9:15. So they sold us a ticket 25 minutes after the bombs went off. And the circle line was closed, so they knew something was wrong. But we all sort of piled down into the Victoria line because it was still open. And we got down there, and so many people were getting on the train because the other lines were closed that it was just packed full. And so we thought, well, we'll stand off to the side and wait for the next train. And they closed the doors, and then they opened them again and said there'd been a power surge, and people needed to get out of the station. The whole system was shut down. And clearly a lot of people thought that it was something temporary, because some people got off and, you know, started going, but a lot of people just sat on the train. A lot of people just stayed there. And we, in fact, sort of, again, backed off a little bit to let the crowds clear a little bit first. And then after a few minutes, the notices changed. And they said there'd been a major power surge, and they started stressing that, and they started using the word evacuate, I think. And the tone of voice just seemed to change of the announcements.
I don't know, it kind of made me think about 9/11. When 9/11 happened back at home, I was in high school in my social studies class. It was shocking to hear that something like that had happened. No one is exempt from terrorism, you know. I tried to remain calm as best as possible, but I just wanted my parents and my family back at home to know that I was okay and fine, and that everyone else in my group was as well.
It was all really surreal, like that day and a couple days after. I was worried about everybody on field trips because everybody was so spread out over the whole city.
There was a mixture of reactions. I mean, I think some people were in shock, and then other people broke down, and pretty much I saw them being really upset by, like, crying emotionally, and I mean, there was a mixture of emotions.
Well, everybody here basically the same. Like, we were first of all worried about the students in the program, if everybody was going to be okay, and then just worrying about what was going to happen next for us. And then back home, everybody was just, you know, glad to hear my voice, glad to hear that I was okay, and just to know that everything was going to be all right.
I was worried about where our students were, how many classes had gone out, how close they were, when we'd hear from them. And I was worried about how Wes was going to get to the airport. But if you're going to die, you're going to die. I mean, there's no point in worrying about it.
Just waiting for everyone to get back, and there's just like these 3 hours of just panic when we didn't know where anybody was and didn't know if anyone was safe or not. And there was just a sigh of relief when that last person finally walked in the door and we finally found out that everyone was okay.
Sometimes I really just don't understand people, and I don't understand their logic, and I don't understand why they do certain things, but I guess there's some things that you just can never understand.
There were a lot of people that were concerned with the transportation system. Everyone came back, called their parents, got in contact with the faculty. They were great about calming everyone down.
Well, the initial thought I had was a lot of concern for our students and our faculty.
The way they were reporting them, it sounded like bombs were going off not at the same time, but in sequences. And so we thought, if they started in the underground and they happened at different times, and now they're on the buses, there may be more. And so we felt pretty strongly we didn't want to go anywhere. I mean, it was nerve-wracking thinking about, you know, going out and getting on a bus or something, because we just didn't know. I'd never been that close to anything quite like this. So that was, you know, it was strange, and it really was weird that day, just not knowing what's going on, and really feeling like you could never get information like you needed, and just not really trusting the information you got.
That it was 9/11 all over again, and that I was just worried. I wanted to make sure my friends were okay, and you know, I felt really horrible for anyone on the tube, because it could have just easily have been me or someone else that I know.
I was a little worried that if we'd have caught a train about a half hour earlier, we probably would have been right in the thick of things, and that's a little, unnerving.
The students were under control. I was very pleased with that. They were very calm and collected. Actually, when we found out there was actually bombs had gone off, and this was, by now we'd walked all the way to Covent Garden, which is quite a walk, and we were probably walking for 3/4 of an hour. I actually let them loose in Covent Garden with the goal of doing some stuff that I'd given them. They came back to me about half an hour earlier, having found out about this, and they'd already contacted their parents.
You're just kind of in shock, because you weren't expecting anything like that to ever happen, especially while you're here. And I've just never experienced anything that close, like being that close with something like, terrorist acts.
I didn't really think that anything was going to happen to us, but the thought, was going through my mind that something could happen to our bus. It was scary, and it took us about an hour to get back here.
It was definitely, it hit a lot harder to me, this bombing than 9/11 did, because I was so close, and you are in the city. And New York, you're several states away, and it just it didn't faze you as much as the other.
My mom immediately started crying when I was on the phone with her, and she turned on the news and she showed my dad, and so they started watching the news, and they were upset, but they were trying to remain calm, and so that I would remain calm. And I immediately sent out an email to all my friends too, to let them know that I was okay, and they all responded, saying that they were glad I was okay and that it was scary and stuff like that. But people here, a lot of people were scared for friends that hadn't returned yet from their field trips and just not knowing if they were okay.
My mom's a bit religious. She goes, "Pray, baby, pray." So I took heed to that. Everyone else was kind of calm after they found out that I was okay, but some of the students were a little hysterical because, we were on foreign soil. We are Americans. We don't know how people would react to this or what they would or would not do. But for the most part, the entire group, they held it together. For the most part, they held it together.
It was early enough that I was able to shoot off some emails before everybody got up. So once people got up and heard the news and they checked their email, they knew I was good.
I was confused and I didn't know, what to do. And as soon as I talked to my parents, they were like really concerned and wanting me to, come home as soon as possible.
A lot of my family members were definitely worried. I had so many emails and phone calls. My parents were actually out of town when it happened, and when my parents found out, they were very worried and were calling because they didn't know what was going on because it was so close. They know that there is a tube stop on campus, and for all that they know, it could have been here, anywhere close to here.
There's a little overreaction there. But by the time they heard about it, my sister and my sister-in-law told me that they heard about it on the way to work, and when they got to work, they had an email from me saying I was fine, so they were okay. And I thought that it was over with my family until this past week, I was out really late with a student that I had to provide transportation for, and I didn't get a chance to send an email. And I got an email from my sister saying, "Are you okay?" Because she had gotten to work and didn't have an email from me, so she overreacted.
Well, my mom really seemed to take it harder than most. I actually called and woke her up because it was still so early in the morning that most people in America hadn't woken up to look at the news yet. At first, she sounded kind of frustrated that I had woken her up so early, and she immediately turned on the news, and all day she said that they had people calling from my church and friends of the family calling all day long, trying to reach them, and they were kind of nervous to reach them. My mom would say that they'd be kind of beating around the bush when she called, and they'd be like, she's okay, she's okay. So there's definitely a lot of support from family and friends while I was over here.
Everyone was worried. My mom was crying when I called her on the phone. Dad was real worried. All my friends emailing me. News traveled pretty fast.
My parents flipped out, sent me like a million emails, and they were really worried.
The one person who got quite concerned was my daughter, and she called me that afternoon, really quite upset. I had emailed my wife, but my wife had not checked her email, so my daughter didn't realize that I had reported in that I was fine.
Everyone was pretty shaken up. Some of my friends had cried about it and were upset. I called my parents that morning. They were on a vacation at the beach, and I woke them up. They didn't know yet, and it was good I called because otherwise they probably would have freaked out.
The people back home were the most anxious, of course, to hear from us, but then the American media, it sounds like, hyped it up really bad. So they were very, very worried about me, but they're fine.
My family, when was it? I checked email at some point, and I guess my father had emailed, and several of my family. And it turned out later, my younger sister, she was very worried, and there had been a lot of phone calls back and forth. So we called and checked in with a couple of family members, and then just a flurry of emails from friends and various people over the next 24 hours or so, just kind of asking where we were. So a lot of people were concerned.
I suddenly got a phone call from my mum and dad asking me, am I okay? Which was cool. I was able to tell them, yeah, I was fine, and then I asked them to phone up Terry, my wife, and tell her that things were okay. But they were very cool and calm and collected. I was very pleased. They were not panicking. Having gone through a lot of the IRA bombings over some 30 years, you just have to remain calm, find out as much information, and then proceed as necessary.
At first, I was scared to get back on the tube and to get on the bus, and Actually, the day after the bombings, I did get on the tube and we got on a train and traveled, and so it didn't take me long to get back into it, but it did scare me at first. And it has been scary at times since then while we've been on the tube or a bus, but I'm not really that scared anymore. It's just one of those things that you never really know it's gonna happen, and I guess you take a chance every time, but I just trust that I'll be okay and that the London police or whoever are doing the best that they can to protect us.
Like I said, no one is exempt from terrorism. Anything could happen in 3 seconds. Tomorrow is not promised to anyone. And if I were to stay here, I think I would be just like the Londoners. Even though the bombing happened, people died. The numbers weren't high. People were lost and they were missing. They were able to still pick the bits and pieces of their lives up and go on with their everyday lives. So to me, that just says that that's a great nation. America was able to do the same thing during 9/11, but we were closer, we came together.
It's kind of interesting that, we were here while it happened and that sort of thing. And it still is a bit, surreal that it did happen. Of course, it's really an awful thing that did happen.
I feel like, I'm still kind of nervous about, getting on the tube.
Just the videos that I saw in the newscast of being in the train and the bomb going off, and we've been in the subways and how crowded they get and just how hectic that had to be as soon as the bomb went off.
Well, it's always a negative experience. Nothing good comes out of it. I just think that I like how the people of London are coping with it and saying we're not afraid and you can't scare us and we're not going to stop traveling.
The best way to react to terrorism that I know of is not to let it affect you, to just get back on that tube. You just can't let the terrorists win.
The Londoners have amazed me of how they have just built back up and banded together, and the transport system was running like the next day, and I got back on the tube the next day, so I was in constant amazement of how they weren't going to let these bombings or this terrorist affect them, so I didn't need to either.
You can't worry about stuff like that. It really, I don't know, it would dull the experience if you were to worry about every time you got on a train. That's everything to get around London is the public transportation. And if you're going to worry about that, you might as well go home. There's no point in worrying about it.
Well, I think I remember several things. One is that as we were going through the day and we were collecting names of students that we could identify as being back on campus, I remember that a lot of the students kept coming in and checking on other people. There was a lot of concern and a lot of compassion that students had for their classmates, and I was very touched by that.
The day before yesterday, we went through Victoria Station again, and that felt a little odd. When I think about it, I think mainly of just the tragedy of it. I mean, over 50 people killed, and it's horrific.
Well, it's definitely made me more aware of everything, kind of like 9/11 did. You just got to be cautious. And with the second bombings, you know, it shows that it can really just happen again.
I guess that image of the bus in Tavistock Square, wherever it was, being ripped open, I will always remember that for as long as I live.
No, not at all. I mean, that's how the bombers win. I mean, you always have to go immediately back to, you know, treating life normally. You take some preventions. You know, you look around. I certainly encourage my students to when they're on the tube, to you know, look around to check things. If they see something that is abnormal, report it. But you can't let the bombers win. I mean, it's something that, as British, we've dealt with since really about 1973, when the bombing outrages started in Northern Ireland, and then they came to the mainland in the late 70s. You have to take precautions. You have to be very aware, observant, you know, and report things. But you can't let it affect your life, otherwise they have won, as I keep on repeating. And, you know, if you look at how the New Yorkers reacted, they didn't panic. During the bombs, well, sorry, not during the planes, when they were hitting the towers, very much under control. You didn't see any real panic. They got out of the way as calmly and collectively as they could. You know, the next day they were back on the trains going underground. They were trying to get back to normal. And that's really the response you have to have, in a sense. You've got to have empathy with the victims and the victim relatives. You must have empathy. You must display that. You know, we had our 2-minute period of silence a couple of days later. You have to remember these people, and you do. But equally, you can't change your life forever, not get on the tube or not fly. You have to do those things. Because otherwise, again, as I said, they win, and that is not appropriate. But equally, you can't just ignore the victims. I mean, you have to think about them. You know, yesterday when I was on the tube, I was thinking about them. You have empathy for them. I mean, it's a terribly sad event and a tragic event. But on the other hand, you must go on. I think our students have taken them very, very well. I was pleased to see that only one left, and I think it's a shame she left. It's from what we understand, there was an enormous amount of parental pressure. I don't necessarily think she wanted to go as much as the parents wanted her to leave, and I think that's very good. I think we should congratulate the parents of the students here, you know, for holding back and allowing the program to make the decision, which was to stay, and you as students to want to stay as well. I think that's very good. I think certainly, you know, if there's any, you can't say there's been good come from it, but I think it's an experience that all people learn from and grow from. And if there is anything good to come of it, that they do appreciate that, you know, this is a very complex world. A lot of people have tremendous hate for society, and it's not religious per se. It's people contriving religious violence to gain an end unto themselves, which is invariably political. I hope that the students will not go away from this thinking that, you know, it's Islamic fundamentalism driving this. It's beyond that. It is a hate against the nature of society funded through or using religious extremism to achieve a goal that is something other than religious. Because we've seen that in Northern Ireland. It is really, religion has very little to do with these kind of actions. It's something political, sociological. I mean, if this is Al-Qaeda, I mean, you know, the guy who started Al-Qaeda from one of the richest families on earth, you know, and he reacted against that. And what we see then, in a sense, is an organization that is running on his ideology that he's been able to marry to a religious fervor that has struck certain people. And we see it in the United States. You know, we see fundamentalism, religious Christian fundamentalism, as we do Islamic. So I don't think we should look at it as a religious result. This is sociological, political. It is an attempt by people to destabilize our society. Ours being the UK has failed. People are more and more aware that we shouldn't cave in to people like this. We should have a united front. Now, it doesn't say that if it is political and it's related to Iran, or Iraq, sorry, that we should ignore what's going on there. We should very much question why we're there as well. I was very, very pleased in how you as students coped with it. It struck me that you paid attention. I think the meeting that the site directors had was very good. It was necessary. It stopped some of the what's the word I'm looking for? The chat and the it just stopped a lot of problems, should I say. And I thought they did a very good job of that. I was pleased to see that the faculty who have never experienced this kind of thing also were very calm and collected. As someone like myself who grew up during the Northern Ireland Troubles, particularly when they moved to the mainland, you know, I was impressed with their reaction, and particularly given that I've experienced this, I was looking to see how they reacted, and they reacted very calmly. They did the right thing, and it was good to see.
I never thought anything like that could happen to me. In fact, being young has a way of making life seem like it could go on forever. I've heard all my life that we are not promised another day, but now that saying takes on a whole new meaning. At some point in our lives, we will all experience tragedy, but it is how we pick up the pieces and move on that will determine how strong we are. I think what I have learned most from this experience isn't just that everything happens for a reason, but that there are reasons behind the actions of others. While I don't agree with the way these terrorists fight back, I think it is our duty as fellow human beings to step back and look at the real reasons behind why these people feel the way they do. Take prejudice out of the equation and overcome evil with good. Maybe then we can all close a chapter in our lives and start a more peaceful and loving one. One where we don't have to fear our fellow human beings just because they are different.